Okay, Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings. This is Rayesa Gheewala, the Divorced Muslimah Coach, and we're going to try this again. And I think, inshallah, we'll have the right settings that we need to delve into this topic that we've been trying with my special guest, Estella. So, as I sit here and wait for all of you lovelies to join, let me know where you're coming in from. Assalamu alaikum, Amy. Assalamu alaikum, Feroz Awar. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for hanging in with us. And we try to work out a little bit of the technicalities. And I'm just waiting for Estella to come on again. It's always, an interesting work in progress, figuring out things as we go. And that's just the way life is, isn't it? Right? That it's always about figuring out things as we go along. There's never really, a right or wrong way to do things, or there's never really, an instruction manual, if you will, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. We had the Quran, but many times in life we get circumstances and situations where we're just get caught off guard, we're not prepared, right? So this is like one of those situations where we just do the best that we can, and just waiting for Estella to join us. And one of the questions that, now my connection is not, let's see, alhamdulillah, like, you never know what is meant, and why things happen the way they do, but to be able to take them as they come and in stride, and knowing that things are working out, they're working out the way they're meant to be, is all cool. So I want to hear from you guys what you want to know about this topic while we wait for Estella to come on. Let me know if my connection is good, because I keep getting this message that my connection is not very good. We'll get there eventually. We'll get there. We might have to, it might take a little bit of time, but inshallah we'll get there. Earlier we were on, while we were waiting for Estella to join us, and it was, we were talking about how good, keeps freezing a bit. Okay, thanks for letting me know. I'm going to see if I could adjust that a little bit. But we were talking earlier about what happens internally with insecurities, with someone mentioned like past demons, and how that affects how you show up, how it affects your behavior, how it affects you either reacting, or it affects how you can respond, right? Because when we're living in this cycle of reactivity, it feels like a free fall, right? It does not feeling very peaceful. It's feeling quite dramatic and chaotic, trying to process, something like betrayal, trying to process something like infidelity in a way that's going to be, in a way for you to move beyond the struggle and the test that you're in, to get out of it, right? Because it feels like it in the moment, but it doesn't always stay constant like that forever. Someone's asking, blessed by Allah, does the pain of betrayal ever get less as because of child arrangements I still have to go see him? Yeah. It would be so much more easier, right, if the person who has caused us harm or betrayed us, been unfaithful to us, just disappears. But it doesn't really work that way, right? The pain definitely does get less And when you're interacting with each other and there is, how did you called it pain, right? Pain that's being triggered or coming up, is because there's a message there. You're receiving that signal from Allah that there is some healing that needs to happen within you, and this trigger or this signal is just showing you where within yourself that needs to happen. And we can recognize that now, but when we're in the moment, it can look very easy that anger at someone else who is doing something or causing us to feel a certain way, and then we lose sight of where we need to look internally to do the healing. I hope that answers your question. And if somebody else has had an experience of this and an experience of where the pain went away, where it got better or didn't, let me know. Share that here with us so we can hear your experience of how it happened for you. And I know for me, for sure, I can tell you from my personal experience that it definitely has gotten better because I've healed. I've taken the efforts to look deeper within myself and my relationship with Allah, my relationship with myself, of what Allah is trying to show me through this test, through this trial, through this trigger, right? So I'm still here. Looks like Estella hasn't been able to join us. I hope that she's okay, and I'm going to check in with her. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. So funny,
Welcome.
so funny. So I went live on mine, and well, everyone got a little taste of, this topic in my page as well.
SubhanAllah.
Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah.
Wa alaikum assalam. Wa alaikum assalam. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'm so happy to see you live here.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you too. Look at that beautiful greenery in the background and the sun shining on you. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Well, hello everyone who's tuning in. Hopefully you've already been excited to start this conversation and getting the questions answered.
Let's give Estella a whole bunch of hearts and love because we've just been so intentional about coming live to share information and something helpful on this topic. And I can't wait to hear from you, Estella. Like, we've just been talking about this topic and okay, let's hear what Estella has to say. So welcome, my dear. And let me give you the stage and let me allow you to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the topic.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. And it's an honor to be here to have this conversation because it's so important. As women, we have to be able to always continuously up-level ourselves emotionally. And I'm a licensed clinical therapist. I'm a sex coach. And what I do is I help busy women get fully aligned with their sensual feminine energy so that they can navigate through the challenges that come up and step into their leadership potential. Because as women, we are leaders, and we have to understand that whether we're moms, whether we're professionals, whether we're daughters, whatever hat we're wearing, we have to recognize our capacity as leaders so that we can step into it. And really the only way we can step into it is by understanding our sensual feminine energy. Yes, we have that masculine aspect as well. But what's so important is to understand our femininity so that we don't get stuck in victimhood, so that we don't get stuck in living and reliving the past, and that we can courageously step into becoming successful problem solvers.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So let's get right into it. I talked a little bit last week about what's happening underneath inside of you when you're experiencing a betrayal of infidelity in your relationship, in your marriage. So I want you, Estella, to shed some light, how can we look backwards and see how we got here? That's what the topic is about today. Let's talk a little bit about reasons why men or women, right? Like, I work with women. I know you work with women, and you also work with some men too. But
Mm-hmm.
most of us work with women, so we hear from the women's perspective, right? But this can
Right.
happen with men and women. So let's talk about the reasons, like how this can happen.
And, the most important thing to look at is communication. From, you know, a very young age, we learn by communicating, or the lack thereof communication. So it's so important to be able to recognize how you step into your connections, because remember, everything has to always come back to us. I mean, as Muslims, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, if we want anything in our world to change, we have to be willing to go inwardly, right? And change what is inside of us. And as women, we carry a lot of baggage. We do. And we also carry generational baggage. So we don't want to go back to our mothers or our grandmothers or our great grandmothers, even though it's important to do that. So the number one thing is that it's so important to recognize that you can't go into a marriage without the tools. And if you have had examples in your life that have influenced you in a way that is conducive to holding on to baggage, then guess what? You're going to bring it into the relationship. And it's layers. It is. It's layers. And it's work. It's inner work that has to take place before you even decide, yeah, I'm ready to go into my next relationship. I mean, I was divorced and married, so, I can look at it from that perspective. First time didn't work. Second time was a huge challenge. And I'm grateful that after 32 years of marriage, we're still married, and it wasn't easy. So betrayal and infidelity are always those indicators that there's a healing that needs to take place. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to betray this person that I love. I'm going to be unfaithful to this person that I love. Nobody wakes up and says that. So there's a history that you have to be willing to look at before you even, connect with somebody at that level of commitment. And we're not doing that. We're not, right now I'm working with a handful of couples that it's so interesting. One of them, out of the 5 couples that I'm currently working with, said, oh, I did have premarital counseling, one session. And now they're in this, and they got married very young, and they're 16 years into their marriage, 5 kids with, all these issues that they never worked on. So betrayal is always about insecurities. Even for infidelity, it's always about insecurities. You're looking to replace something that's missing.
Right.
Guess what? The grass is never greener on the other side. And it's so important as women, especially, because I'm a woman. So I have a certain perspective on the male side because I've been working with males for so long. But from a woman's perspective, you have to cultivate a level of emotional intelligence to not take it personally.
Yes.
That is so
I'm just going to
important.
pause there because I keep saying this over and over and over again. It's like someone's behavior and actions is a reflection of what's going on inside of them. It's about them. It has really nothing to do with you. And we hear this all the time, but while we're processing and internalizing and taking meaning from what an action that someone has done, it becomes a personal attack. We take it on board and we relate it to our value and our worth. And let me know, guys, thank you for listening to us, and let me know if this is resonating with you. If these are questions or these are points that are helpful to you, or what else you want to know about it. Like, this is totally interactive. This is here to support you in your needs. Yeah. And you know what, Estella? One of the things I heard from you that I got was, you said communication, and you said being aware of how do you communicate, right? Knowing your communication style or pattern. And one of the things that that I wrote up for what we're going to get out of this talk today is a lack of understanding of the self.
Yes.
Right? Because which leads to a lack of understanding of your partner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's going to be personalization of things that go wrong. And so you have to know yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to understand your triggers. You know, there's this process that I take for men and women through to identify the sensory details of an experience, the need that was needed in that experience, specifically when it's a negative experience, and the values that go with it. When you can understand the sensory details of a past experience, and this does have to go back to childhood. How did you experience, a negative situation when, maybe your peers were, turning their back on you, or when your family didn't understand you, right? Or
how did you cope? How did you cope? Yeah.
How did you cope? And at the level of the sensory details, because that's where it starts, in the feelings that we have. If we can't understand those feelings, then the thoughts are going to just take control. We can't be the captain of our thinking if we don't understand our feelings. And what happens is that we lose the ability to really listen to our gut and trust our gut.
Isn't that so lost these days? The ability to trust yourself, trusting your intuition. It's not taught. It's taught not to trust yourself, actually.
Yeah.
From childhood.
We're taught to be followers. We're taught to pay attention to what everyone else is doing. And how much talk is there now about stop comparing yourself to others? But from a very young age, in a classroom setting, there's always somebody that you're told to emulate, right? Or in your home with siblings, right? And this can just create so much confusion in adulthood.
Internal confusion, right? And then that creates external chaos and confusion. One of the things you mentioned about generational patterns, or you called it baggage, right? And people have said they've called it generational trauma, right? These are all connected and related.
Yeah.
And so it's so important, I think, to understand that. I was just talking to a client earlier today before our conversation. She realized that she had some big feelings around her dad and his actions. However, her husband is the same way. She ended up marrying somebody who's exactly like her dad. And it just dawned her like, why do we attract people like this, right? And we were talking about how we only know what we know. We've been taught and trained to know what we know. So then we look for that. We look for what we know, what a man is supposed to be like, what a husband is supposed to be like, how a wife gets treated, how kids get treated, and it's all in the subconscious. So that what it's seeking or it's looking for, and part of the other thing is that Allah sends the people to us that need to trigger where we need to heal, as you said.
Absolutely. What's familiar is always going to be what we're attracted to, even if that familiarity is toxic, because that's what we know. So it takes a lot of courage, a lot of inner strength to say, I'm going to reinvent myself, and it's okay. Yeah. I'm gonna transform myself, and I'll take on the judgment and the criticism that comes with it, because that's usually actually the biggest fear in creating the change that we know that we need. Like, how many times have those of you that are listening, I know I did this for a lot of years, that I would dream about change, but I wouldn't take the action simply because I was afraid of maybe what my in-laws would think about me, or what my siblings would say, or what my parents might think. And it's so important to be able to just acknowledge that individuality. And individuality is not about, it's just me, me, me. No, it's about just recognizing the uniqueness that we all have, and to be able to celebrate it, so that when those differences show up in between a husband and a wife, you know, you're not shocked that your wife is not just like your mother, or you're not shocked that your husband is not doing, you know, what you believed in your mind that a man should do, right? So, I mean, this conversation is long overdue, and I know that it continues to evolve, right? It continues to evolve as we evolve.
Right. And I want to just touch base with something that you mentioned about understanding the self. I'd like to go into like talking about why this happens. I want to get into something, but before we go there, somebody asked a question, what do you do? And the question is no longer here, but they asked the question, what do you do if your partner blames you for their infidelity?
Well, number one is you have to get support, so you don't get stuck in the belief that you did something wrong, because that's his coping mechanism. How, you know, he
deflect and blame.
Yeah, you know, you didn't give me sex when I wanted, you didn't dress up for me when I wanted you to, you didn't cook me the foods that I wanted to.
You don't pay attention to me.
You don't pay.
Time that I need. Yeah.
And it works in both directions. Like, it works in both directions. So if the man is blaming the woman for his infidelity, what you actually have to do is you have to elevate your empathy. You have to elevate your ability to recognize that there is this deep level of insecurity in this individual. When somebody is so afraid to look in the mirror and hold themselves accountable, their perception of themselves is to the floor. How can they even, you know, look in the mirror? It's so much easier to blame it on somebody else because of that level of insecurity. So the number one thing that is necessary, and this is why as women, if you haven't worked with a coach, then you have to invest in yourself and know that it's an investment that will give you just a return over and over again. Because if you are in a situation where somebody's deflecting their problems on you, and you don't know how to hold that, and you don't know how to provide a space. Now, see, and this is also so important to understand, providing empathy for somebody else is not about giving your value away. So many people say, you know, I'm too much of an empath and I feel the negativity of others and it depletes me. And the reason that happens is because you don't truly know yourself, and you're falling into the trap of feeling sorry for yourself, victimhood.
Yes.
And that is toxicity overflow.
And what you said about getting help, because, and I was talking about this earlier in one of the lives while we were waiting to connect, is that if you can't, we all have blind spots, right? And sometimes we can't see that we're thinking of ourselves as a victim, and we cannot give somebody the empathy that is needed in a certain situation to be able to move beyond where you are right now, is if you can't give that empathy to yourself first, by not taking on the blame that somebody is putting on you for an action that they did.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like an alcoholic saying, I got drunk and it's your fault.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And unless you can hold the space to create the healing that is necessary,
and
then
that's what Amy's saying.
You're going to become codependent.
Yes. Right. Because your well-being or your state of being is you're relying on the other person to give you that. And Allah didn't create us that way.
No. And even if that relationship ends, you're going to repeat that pattern.
Yeah,
you're going to repeat that pattern if you don't step out of it, and if you don't gain that higher level of awareness
Yes.
and consciousness that allows you to, be flexible in your own thinking.
Yeah. And Amy's saying empathy is healing, and that's so
Yeah.
true. But we have to heal ourselves first. We have to have that self-empathy before we can offer it to somebody else. And somebody's saying here, what if he doesn't want therapy, but I do? What would you say to that, Estella?
We actually don't need the other partner in therapy for change to truly happen. So
say that again.
Your partner doesn't need therapy along with you for change to happen, because two things will happen. You're going to up level yourself, and you're either going to pull him with you, because two people can't be in the same household for very long when one of them is rising above. You're going to eventually pull the other person, or you're going to have to make a decision that this person, that you need to release them, and you need to let them go.
I love that.
And that you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So
right.
You don't have to stay in these relationships. And, culturally, this is reinforced over and over again. And
it's not Islamically, actually.
It is not part of our faith.
Right.
If you do research on the women of the time of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, they would leave a man in an instant if it was toxic, because it's all right.
Because Allah doesn't ask you to be in that. He doesn't want to see you suffer. He doesn't want to see you destroyed. He wants to see you elevate.
And your children will receive that same toxic environment.
The same message repeating,
right? Same message. And that's where the generational, inheritance, that's what you're giving them as their inheritance.
Yeah.
And if you don't break that, a child from a broken relationship where the two individuals, or at least one of them, elevates themselves, evolves, creates more awareness, that child or children, they're going to have a stronger foundation as they move forward in their relationship. Yes, of course, we have a lot of couples that divorce and they don't work on themselves, and it's just the reinforcement of the toxicity. But that's why we're having this conversation, right, Rayesa?
Right.
So we can create awareness so that you ladies can up level yourself and invest in yourself. You're not going to, reading books is great. I mean, I just started reading this amazing book, Joy Jots. I don't know if you've ever, Joy Jots by Tamara Gray.
That. Yes.
And I've been wanting to get it forever, and it's got amazing stories of.
He has videos on that too, on Rabada.
And it's great to be able to get information from books and reading. I'm not saying, but if you don't recognize the importance of investing in yourself and hiring a capable therapist, because not every therapist is capable of helping you, a capable coach, like vetting yourself and vetting who's going to serve you until you find that connection with somebody that can really elevate you and stretch you. Because guess what? Coaching you, my dear sisters, is not about keeping you comfortable.
Never, right? Because you don't grow in your comfort zone, right? Only so one of the things I wanted to touch on when you talked about understanding yourself, you talked about communication, knowing your own communication style and patterns. That, I guess that would relate to needs, right? Like knowing yourself would be knowing what are your needs, what are your wants, what are your desires, how are you getting your needs met and fulfilled. And we have many different needs on different levels. I'll let you go into a little bit of detail. So can you talk a little bit about whose responsibility is it to take care of to meet your needs, and how do you go about doing it? Because I think that's related to certain needs not being fulfilled in a relationship where you start looking elsewhere for it, whether you realize it or not.
And as human beings, we're never going to fill each other's needs. Even with our children, as we're raising our children, they need us through the stages of life where they can't do things for themselves. And as children start doing things for themselves, then it's that actualization, self-actualization that is so important. And many times, I mean, generations and generations don't get that because so many parents are just very controlling, right? Very controlling. So you grow up thinking that somebody else is responsible for meeting your needs. But nobody can meet your needs. Nobody can meet your needs except for yourself. And that sometimes is really hard.
And that's your personal responsibility. You cannot expect other people to meet. Maybe you've been taught that, but that's not how it works, is it?
No, it doesn't. And if you want to cultivate a connection that has the meaning and the depth that allows for that exchange to happen, you know, where you feel the fulfillment, then that's a different place to live from. You're not expecting somebody to make you happy. You're not expecting somebody to make you feel that fulfillment.
Yeah, Amy's saying even in a healthy relationship, nobody can meet that need. True.
No, you have to meet it yourself. And that means that you have to love yourself. You have to fall in love with yourself. And if you've never experienced mirror work is a really powerful practice where you stand in front of the mirror. And I always do this and teach it that you should set a timer. You should set a timer because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable and you won't do it. You have to maintain eye contact with yourself and tell yourself positive affirmations that at the beginning you won't believe because they feel uncomfortable, not because they're not true. You know, telling yourself that you're there for yourself, that you love yourself, that
Amy's saying love and compassion and mercy for the self.
It's where it starts.
We're not taught this. We're not taught this at all.
We're taught that we have to think of everyone else, and what that does is that distorts the way that we, you know, interact with ourselves. And what it does also is it builds resentment and it builds bitterness, because then we become angry. But I've been nurturing my kids their whole life, and now that they're adults, they won't even come and visit me. And then we have these expectations like they should come every weekend and visit me because I gave them what I gave them while they were growing up, right? And this is an example of that distortion. And this is the inheritance that we don't want to hand off to our upcoming generations.
I think that it's important to mention here, like, why and how can we love and have compassion for ourselves and mercy for ourselves, is because that's what Allah feels for us, and that's our birthright. But we're not taught of our relationship with Allah in that way, that unconditional, like, love, compassion, mercy, like it's a open source, if you will, to continue getting it from your relationship. Unlimited. Right.
Like, unlimited source. And that's where you tap into it, through your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful to us, then our responsibility is to be merciful for ourselves, to ourselves, so that we elevate. When we elevate self-love, self-compassion, self-empathy, then we will naturally be that way to others, even in the midst of strife, even in the midst of the most uncomfortable of circumstances.
Yeah. And I think that's like how we get our needs met, right? From that unlimited source. And, you know, having that level of love, care, respect, and validation and honor and dignity for yourself is a form of worship. Self-love and self-care is a form of worship, because you're respecting a servant of a creation of God, right? And that's
absolutely yourself. That's yourself. Allah created you. Allah created me. If I don't love myself more than I love my husband, then who's going to love me more?
Yeah.
Right? What other human being?
it's disrespecting Allah's creation.
It's ingratitude, right? It's
Yeah.
ingratitude. And what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us? If you are ungrateful, what's going to happen? But if we are grateful, the doors of abundance open. We'll get more and more.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that was really important, that, you know, how a lack of self-love leads to self-harm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because then you tolerate things that shouldn't be tolerated, and you categorize them as normal.
Yeah.
Right?
Normal. Really, exactly. So, you know, it's kind of like when somebody's in an abusive relationship and that's all they've known about love. It's normal. It's like their comfort zone. It's normal.
Yeah.
Right? Even though their soul is trying to tell them otherwise, but their brain hasn't seen that.
And yeah. And this is why for us as Muslims, it's so important to work on purifying our heart, because our heart is what connects us with that intuition and that ability to really listen to our body. But we know that if it's, you know, got black dot after black dot and it's covered and veiled, you know, we're not going to be able to receive, you know, what we have access to naturally: the mercy of Allah, the healing of Allah, the love of Allah.
Yes. Estella, this question came up, how to heal after a divorce with a narcissist. And, you know, I can talk, and I talk about this all the time, but I want you to share your expertise on this.
The number one way to heal from a divorce with a narcissist is through forgiveness. Through forgiveness. It's the only way that you'll be able to create that foundation that you need, through forgiveness. You have to remember that a narcissistic human being is a narcissistic human being because they've been traumatized.
It's their
because
coping.
they've been damaged. And forgiveness is a process that is for you, not for somebody else. Forgiveness isn't about, you know, forgetting the injustices or reconciliation with somebody that's caused you damage or condoning. You know, it's about letting go of the anger, the resentment, the hurt, so that you can elevate yourself, Without forgiveness, you will latch on to that trauma and you actually won't want to let it go.
Yeah. It'll fuel you, right?
Mm-hmm. It'll fuel you. And there are different phases of uncovering forgiveness that you have to be willing to go through, and you have to be willing to, endure the emotions that it takes to get past it. But you're already in turmoil. So you're already in turmoil. I always tell my clients, pick the, which one do you want? Do you want the turmoil that you're already in and you're not getting the results you want? Or do you want the turmoil of, digging through the shit, excuse my language, and getting to a higher level where it's then just an experience that gave you wisdom, gave you gems, gave you a new perspective, gave you healing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question. And I love, again, narcissists and narcissistic behaviors is a reflection of how that person deals with their life and how they cope and how they stay afloat and okay. And part of that is having to be in a lot of control. They're very, very controlling because they don't know any other way to live in peace.
And they're afraid. Most important of all, there's deep fear.
Yeah.
Deep fear.
And I think understanding helps a little bit, because it doesn't mean, like what you said, it's really important, because a lot of times people get confused and they think and then they start feeling sorry, or they start feeling sorry for the person. No, it's not about having a pity party for yourself or for someone else. Everyone has to be held accountable for their actions. And if it's not safe for you to be in there, then you need to get out, and get help to get out, because, being in a relationship with a narcissist, it can get worse, because it's all about the control.
Yeah.
So,
and it will get worse, and it will get worse. And it will either, shut down the one receiving to the point of suicidal thoughts, or take the other person to the side of homicidal thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can go either way, right? Either way.
And there are very real scenarios in life that we've all heard about.
Yeah. Somebody asked the question, is it wrong to want justice versus forgiveness?
Is the justice going to give you peace in your life?
And what does it mean to have justice? How are you defining? Yeah. How are you defining that having justice? What does that mean to you? Where are you looking for from justice? The reality is that we will never find the justice that will satisfy our soul in this world
unless you heal. Unless you heal.
Yes.
And the only way to heal is to go through forgiveness.
Yeah.
And yes, as you forgive the other person, you're going to have to forgive yourself too.
I think you have to forgive yourself before you forgive the other person.
You do. You actually do. You have to forgive yourself, or it's a process of both happening, so that you can, begin to experience that expansion of your capacity to hold emotions that are hard, that are challenging.
Yes. Khulud is saying, thank you for beautifully answering the question.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And TI0502 is saying, from Allah. And I think what you mentioned, Estella, that healing will give you the peace, right? That unless you heal, then you will feel at peace, whether you get the justice or not, from the person in this world, right? And I think what the person said is from Allah. I think we have to recognize the path is always with Allah, from Allah to Allah. It's always about you and Allah. Always.
Yeah, because remember, whatever's meant to be for you is never going to miss you. Whatever is not meant to be for you is never going to come near you.
Yeah.
So
and the justice from Allah is, that's part of our faith. Do we believe that Allah is going to give us the justice that we want, because he's the most just, right?
Yeah.
Like Allah can forgive us for our mistakes when we ask for forgiveness, but Allah is so just that he doesn't forgive what's not his to forgive, meaning like he will allow another one of his servants to hold the other person accountable, right? He doesn't forgive on somebody else's behalf.
No. And what I want the sisters to really grasp today is that when they start that journey of self-forgiveness, self-love, self-empathy, it's a natural progression that'll get you there. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, maybe not even next year, but you will eventually get there. I love my father dearly, and he was a very narcissistic man, because that's all he knew. That's how he coped. And I was so grateful to be guided to the path of Islam, because if I hadn't, my dad passed away 3 years ago. If I hadn't, I can almost guarantee I would now be living this life of turmoil and and bitterness, because I didn't heal my own feelings towards my father. And the beautiful thing is, as I healed my own feelings towards my father, he naturally healed at his own pace. Mm. And by the time he was in his deathbed, it was a beautiful experience that we both got to share as he left this world. And the sad thing is, I have 5 brothers and a sister who didn't do the work that they needed to do. And it's really sad to see their struggles now that he's not here.
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah. Yeah. One of the things you said was that as you healed that experience of having a father who was a narcissist, that helped him to heal because you're transmitting that healed energy now, that you're exchanging that energy, right? So, you know what they say, hurt people, heal people.
Yeah. Yeah.
How it works, right?
Yeah. And I, am so grateful. I'm beyond grateful to be able to know how to navigate through that aspect of healing that I needed. And that's why I teach it to others. That's why I teach it and advocate that you find somebody to help you.
Absolutely. And that was one thing I wanted to get to, but let's answer a couple of these questions. And TI052 is asking, is it wrong? Oh, the question just disappeared. Is it wrong? What was the question? Did you see
to ask for justice for a cheater or something?
Yeah.
I didn't grasp the whole question.
Something like that. And I think, I think we covered that in terms of
we did.
What's going to give you peace.
And remember, the cheating is not about you. The cheating is not about you.
Mm.
And you can still, now, if you are wanting to stay in a relationship where there was infidelity, you can do that. You can do that. And your level of love will increase, and your level of healing will influence and impact. There are many success cases of marriages of infidelity that did the work together.
Yeah. And I was mentioning that earlier while we were waiting for you, that, trust is given when you're starting a marriage, right? But once it's broken, it has to be earned. But that could happen, It's you need to rebuild the trust that is not being given so easily, or you can't take it for granted anymore. And we're, as human beings, we're capable of doing that with the right support and the intention. We can do those things.
And knowing how to set your boundaries and your limits, because if you don't learn how to set your own boundaries and your limits, history will repeat itself. History will repeat. It's up to you to learn to say, no, I don't agree with this. It's up to you to say, this is, something I'm not going to move forward with.
Yeah. Yep.
There's another question. How do you know you have healed and ready to remarry? Well, the number one way.
Answer that from the perspective of being betrayed or cheated on. Answer that from that perspective.
So the only way that you're going to know if you're truly healed is if in the relationship you're going to talk about, your history without allowing it to be toxic. So, because, yes, it's a clean slate, it's a clean start, but the triggers are always there. The triggers are always there, and you have to understand how to recognize those triggers so that they become cues.
Mm.
So
Signals.
They're signals. They're signals. So when you're ready to get married again, you're also going to need to go through couples counseling together. So if you're ready, I always bring it back to, if you see your value and you can invest in yourself, then you're going to see that you're going to create the foundation that you need. When you build a house, you need to have, a strong slab, right? A strong slab, or else the house is going to tip over with the first earthquake in California or the first mudslide, where there's a lot of rain. So when you're willing to see that, okay, this is the investment that I need to make sure that we're on the same page, that we're really bringing up topics that are important. What are your, communication styles about money? What are your how do you talk? Do you talk about sex? Can you talk about sex before you get married? Can you talk about sex, before you are in a committed relationship? Yes. So if you're going on your second marriage, then there are some things that need to be brought out in the open with confidence and with courage.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part and parcel of doing our due diligence before we get married, you know?
Yeah.
Look at all of the research that we do when we buy a car or buy a home or even like a computer, you know? But how much effort and investment of our time and our energy and our resources do we put into when we're talking about making a big life decision about marriage or about ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes, kind of in a different direction. We have to hold our Islamic centers, our masjids, our imams responsible to create the infrastructure so that it's easily accessible. Because so many couples are like, where do I go? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Who do I trust?
Yeah, exactly. I want you on that note to help tie this conversation together with the topic of getting help and support and the shame around that, being able to see beyond that. Why, even with the shame, we've been conditioned with shame. Why is it so important to move beyond that and get the help and support that you need?
Well, first you have to understand the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt, feeling guilty, teaches you how to be more proactive, how to pay attention. So when you feel the guilt of, oh no, my marriage didn't make it, I failed, then you have to step into action. So what are you going to do about it? And shame is all about turning on yourself and thinking that you're a bad person. And if you are beating yourself up and saying, I'm just a horrible person, nobody's going to love me, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, I don't have what it takes, then what you're doing is you're being ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has given you this opening. He's giving you this opening so that you can evolve, so that you can transform, so that you can elevate yourself. And many get stuck in that because of culture, right? Because of culture. Because if we really reinforced our faith more often than culture, those, those aspects that wouldn't come up as often as they do.
Yeah. Amy's saying so true. Who do you trust through these situations? I love that question because how do we know where to go, where to turn? And we always make dua. We always ask Allah to send us who we need. And without a doubt, He sends us. Those people come into our life. And it's up to us whether we're going to accept it and, sign up or get the help and invest in that, or we're just going to shut the door and say,
I'll figure it out tomorrow. I'll figure it out next week. I'll figure it out next year, right?
Yeah.
And then the emotional toxicity just expands.
Right. So tell us, Estella, what are your last parting words for us in terms of this topic? And what do you want our listeners, our audience, to take away?
What I really want everyone to take away is that, growth and evolving and transformation is a process. It's a process. And it takes 10,000 hours to create a new habit, to create change. So first and foremost, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you have to have patience. You have to have patience not to put up with things, but you have to have patience to continue the momentum. So the most important thing is if you don't have that inertia, if you don't have that momentum, that's already set you in the trajectory of creating, emotional bandwidth and growth and the capacity to navigate through situations, then you have to take inventory of yourself. And you have to be really honest with yourself. And you have to look at the opportunities that are landing on your plate. And I know you and I, and of course, I'm a coach, I'm a therapist. Yes, of course, I work to get, you know, a certain number of one-on-one clients a year. And I look to fill my groups, my academy with a certain number of clients. But I also do a lot of just, you know, free work where consultations that are confidential and, you know, are just complimentary. So when an opportunity lands on your plate, take it.
Yeah. Don't
Don't
think about it. Don't overthink
yeah.
about it. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Estella, for all of your words of wisdom, your insights, your advice, your reminders, uh, just everything that you've shared with us in terms of how do we, how do we get here and not having our needs met? Who's responsible for having, taking care of our needs? How do we do that? Like knowing yourself, right? And then investing in yourself, valuing yourself, all of these important things that you've shared with us. It's been so valuable. And TI0502 saying, Jazakallah khair for your time, and may Allah multiply your efforts and reward in this world and after. Ameen, ameen. Jazakallah
for
khair.
all of us. Ameen. Alhamdulillah wa iyyakum. Well, thank you so much for suggesting this and for allowing me to be a part of this conversation with you, Rayesa. Inshallah, we'll continue in different forms and capacities to collaborate and to just create that opportunity for sisters to see that this is possible. It's possible to heal. It's possible to transform. It's possible to elevate ourselves in every area.
Absolutely. All right. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Love you. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.